I can't find my copy of Swimsuit, so this is from archive.org, Chapter 31. We were back in the black sedan. This time I was in front, beside the driver. Marco adjusted his rearview mirror, and we exchanged nods, but there was nothing to say. It was all going on in the back seat between Barbara and Levon. Levon was explaining to his wife, Barb, I didn't tell you what that bastard said verbatim, because there was nothing to be gained from it. I'm sorry. I'm your wife. You had no right to hold back what he said. She's fallen into bad hands, okay? That's the only thing I didn't tell you, and I still wouldn't tell you. But I had to tell Jackson. I tried to spare you, sweetheart. I wanted to spare you. Barb cried, Spare me? You lied to me, Levon. You lied. And then Levon was crying too. And I realized this was what had been binding Levon up, why he'd been so glassy-eyed and removed. A man had said that he was going to hurt his daughter, and Levon hadn't told his wife, and now he couldn't pretend anymore that it wasn't true. I wanted to give them some privacy, so I lowered the window, stared out at the beachfront whizzing by, at the families picnicking by the ocean as Kim's parents suffered terribly. The contrast between the campers and the weeping couple behind me was excruciating. I made a note then swiveled in my seat and trying for something comforting, I said to Levon, Jackson isn't subtle, but he's on the case. He might be a pretty good cop. Kim's father leveled hard eyes on me. I think you're right about Jackson. He nailed you in 5 seconds. Look at you, you parasite, writing your story, selling newspapers on our pain. I felt the accusation like a gut punch, but there was some truth in it. I guess I swallowed the hurt and found my compassion for Levon. I said, You've got a point, Levon, but even if I'm exactly what you say, Kim's story could get out of control and eat you alive. Think of JonBenet Ramsey, Natalie Holloway, Chandra Levy. I hope Kim is safe and that she's found fast, but whatever happens, you're going to want me with you because I'm not going to fan the flames, and I'm not going to make anything up. I'm going to tell the story right. Chapter 32. Marco watched until Hawkins and McDaniels' passed between the koi ponds and entered the hotel before he put the car in gear, eased out onto Wailea Alanui Drive and headed south. As he drove, he felt under the seat, pulled out a nylon duffel bag and put it beside him. Then he reached behind the rearview mirror where he'd parked the cutting-edge wireless high-resolution micro-video camera. He ejected the media card and dropped it into his shirt pocket. He had a thought that maybe the camera had slipped during the drive back from the police station, and the angle might have been off, but even if he just got the crying, he had his soundtrack for another scene. Levon talking about bad hands? Priceless. Sneaky Marco. Imagine their surprise when they figure it all out, if they ever did. He felt a rush as he added up the cash potential of his new contract, the thick stack of euros with the possibility of doubling his take, depending on the vote of the Alliance on the project as a whole. He would thrill them to the roots of their short hairs. That's how good this film would be. And all he had to do was what he did best. How could a job possibly be better than this? Marco saw his turn coming up, signaled, got into the right lane, then entered the parking lot of the shops at Wailea. He parked the caddy in the southernmost section of the lot, far from the mall's surveillance cameras and next to his nondescript rented Taurus. Hidden behind the caddy's tinted glass, the killer stripped himself of all things, Marco. the chauffeur's cap and wig, fake mustache, livery jacket, cowboy boots. Then he took Charlie Rollins out of the bag. The baseball cap, beat up Adidas, wraparound shades, press pass, and both cameras. He changed quickly, bagged the Marco artifacts, then made the return trip to the Wailea Princess in the Taurus. He tipped the bellman $3, then checked in at the front desk, lucking out, getting a king-size bed, ocean view. Leaving the deck, heading for the stairway at the far end of the marble acreage of the lobby. Henri, as Charlie Rollins, saw the McDanielses and Ben Hawkins sitting together around a low glass table, coffee cups in front of them. Rollins felt his heart kick into overdrive as Hawkins turned, looked at him, pausing for a nanosecond. Maybe his reptilian brain was making a match before his rational brain, fooled by the Rollins getup, steered his gaze past him. The game could have been over in that one look, but Hawkins hadn't recognized him, and he'd been sitting right beside him in the car for hours. This was the real thrill, skating along the razor's edge and getting away with it. So Charlie Rollins, photographer from the non-existent Talk Weekly, jacked it up a notch. He raised his Sony, say cheese, mousies, and snapped off 3 shots of the McDanielses. Gotcha, Mom and Dad. His heart was still pounding as Levon scowled and leaned forward, blocking his camera's eye view of Barbara. Ecstatic, the killer took the stairs to his room, thinking now about Ben Hawkins, a man who interested him even more than the McDanielses did. Hawkins was a great crime writer, every one of his books as good as The Silence of the Lambs. But Hawkins hadn't quite made it to the big time. Why not? Rollins slipped the keycard into the slot and got the green light. His door opened onto a scene of casual magnificence that he barely noticed. He was busy turning ideas over in his mind, thinking about how to make Ben Hawkins an integral part of his project. It was just a question of how best to use him. Chapter 33. Levon put down his coffee cup, the porcelain chattering against the saucer, knowing that Barb and Hawkins and probably the entire gang of Japanese tourists trooping by could see that his hands were shaking, but he couldn't do a thing about it. That damn blood-sucking paparazzo pointing the camera at him and Barb. Plus he was reeling from the aftershocks of his out-of-control fight with Lieutenant Jackson. He still felt the shove in the balls of his hands, still felt the flush of mortification at the idea that he could be in a jail cell right now. But hell, he'd done it, and that was that. The bright side, he'd motivated Jackson to bust his ass on Kim's behalf. If not, too bad. They weren't going to be relying entirely on Jackson anymore. Levon felt someone coming up behind him, and Hawkins was getting out of his chair, saying, "There he is now." Levon looked up, saw a 30-ish man coming across the lobby in slacks and a blue sports jacket over a bold Hawaiian print shirt, his bleached blonde hair parted in the middle. Hawkins was saying, "Levon, Barbara, meet Eddie Kiola, the best private detective in Maui." "The only private detective in Maui," Kiola said, his smile showing braces on his teeth. Gosh, Levon thought, he's not much older than Kim. This was the detective who found the Reese girl? Kiola shook hands with the McDanielses, sat down in one of the richly upholstered rattan-backed chairs, and said, "Good to meet you. And forgive me for jumping right in, but I've already got some feelers out." "Already?" Barb asked. "As soon as Ben called me, I reached out. I was born about 15 minutes from here, and I was in the force for a few years when I got out of school, University of Hawaii. I've got a good working relationship with the police," he said. He wasn't show-offy in Levon's opinion, was just stating his credentials. They've got a suspect, Keola added. We know him, Levon said, and he told Keola about Doug Cahill being Kim's ex-boyfriend, then went over the phone call back home in Michigan that had cracked open his universe like it was a raw egg. Barb asked Keola to tell them about Carol Reese, the 20-year-old track star from Ohio State who'd gone missing a couple of years before. I found her in San Francisco, Keola said. She had a bad news, violent boyfriend, and so she kidnapped herself, changed her name and everything. She was powerfully mad at me for finding her, he said, nodding his head as he remembered. Levon said, tell me how this would work. Keola said he wanted to talk to the Sporting Life photographer, see if he might have filmed some bystanders at the shoot, and that he'd talk to hotel security, see the security tapes from the Typhoon Bar the night Kim disappeared. Let's hope Kim shows up on her own, Keola went on, but if not, this is going to be basic shoe leather detective work. You'll be my only client. I'll pull in additional help as needed, and we'll work around the clock. It's over when you say it's over and not before. That's the right way to go. Levon discussed rates with Keola, but it didn't really matter. He thought about the hours posted on the door at the police station in Kihei. Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Saturdays, 10 to 4. Kim, in a dungeon or a ditch, helpless. Levon said, you're hired. You've got the job. Chapter 34. My phone rang as soon as I opened the door to my room. I said hello to a woman who said, Ben Hawkins, strong accent. I said, yes, this is Hawkins. And I waited for her to tell me who she was, but she didn't identify herself. There's a man staying in the Princess Hotel. Go on. His name is Nils Bjorn, and you should talk to him. And why is that? My caller said that Bjorn was a European businessman who should be investigated. He was in the hotel when Kim McDaniels went missing. He could be. You should talk to him. I pulled at the desk drawer looking for stationery and a pen. What makes this Nils Bjorn suspicious? I asked, finding the paper and pen. Writing down the name. You talk to him. I have to hang up now, the woman said, and did. I took a bottle of Perrier from the fridge and went out to my balcony. I was staying at the Marriott, a quarter-mile up the beach from the much pricier Wailea Princess, but with the same dazzling ocean view. I sipped my Perrier and thought about my tipster. For starters, how had she found me? Only the McDanielses and Amanda knew where I was staying. I went back through the sliding doors, booted up my laptop, when I got an internet connection, I Googled Nils Bjorn. The first hit was an article that had run in the London Times a year before, about a Nils Bjorn who had been arrested in London, held on suspicion of selling arms to Iran, released for lack of evidence. I kept clicking and opening articles, all of which were similar, if not identical, to the first. I opened another Perrier and kept poking. Found another story on Bjorn going back to 2005. A charge of aggravated assault on a woman, the legal term for rape. The woman's name wasn't mentioned, only that she was a model, age 19, and again, Bjorn wasn't indicted. My last stop on Bjorn's internet trail was Skoll, a glossy European Society magazine. There is a photo that had been taken at a reception dinner for a Swedish industrialist who had opened a munitions factory outside of Gothenburg. I enlarged the photo, studied the man identified as Bjorn, stared at his flashbulb-lit eyes. He had regular features, light brown hair, straight nose, looked to be in his 30s, and had not one remarkable or memorable feature. I saved the photo on my hard drive, and then I called the Wailea Princess and asked for Nils Bjorn. I was told he checked out the day before. I asked to be put through to the McDanielses. I told Levon about my phone call from the woman and what I knew about Nils Bjorn. He'd been charged with selling arms to a terrorist nation, and he'd been charged with raping a model. Neither charge had stuck. 2 days ago, he'd been staying at the Wailea Princess Hotel. I was trying to keep my excitement in check, but I could hear it in my voice. This could be a break, I said. Chapter 35. Levon was holding for Jackson. After 5 minutes of music, he was told the police lieutenant would call him back. He hung up the phone, turned on the television. A big plasma thing took up half the wall as the news was coming on. First came the flashy graphic intro to All Island News at Noon with Tracy Baker and Candy Koalani, and then Baker was talking about the still missing model, Kim McDaniels, and cutting to a picture of her in a bikini. Then Jackson's face was on the screen above the word live. He was talking to the press in front of the police station. Levon shouted, "Barb, come in here quick," as he cranked up the volume. Barb sat next to him on the sofa just as Jackson was saying, "We're talking to a person of interest, and this investigation is ongoing. Anyone with information about Kim McDaniels is asked to call us. Confidentiality will be respected, and that's all I can say at this time." "They arrested someone or not?" Barb said, clutching his hand. "A person of interest is a suspect, but they don't have enough on him, or they'd be saying he was in custody." Levon cranked up the volume a little more. A reporter asked, "Lieutenant, we understand you're talking to Doug Cahill?" "No comment. That's all I have for you. Thank you." Jackson turned away, and the reporters went nuts. And then Tracy Baker was back on the screen saying, "Doug Cahill, linebacker for the Chicago Bears, has been seen on Maui, and informed sources say he was Kim McDaniels' lover." A picture came on the screen of Doug in his uniform, helmet under his arm, huge grin, cropped blonde hair, Midwestern good looks. "I could see him pestering her," Barb said, chewing on her lower lip, snatching the remote out of Levon's hand, dialing the volume down. "But hurt her? I do not believe that." And then the phone rang. Levon grabbed it off the hook. "Mr. McDaniels, this is Lieutenant Jackson." "Are you arresting Doug Cahill? If you are, it's a mistake." "A witness came forward an hour ago, a local who said he'd seen Cahill harassing Kim after the photo shoot." "Didn't Doug tell you he hadn't seen Kim?" Levon asked. "Right, so maybe he lied to us, and so we are talking to him now. He's still denying any involvement." "There's someone else you should know about," Levon said, and he told Jackson about Hawkins's recent phone call concerning a tip about an international businessman named Nils Bjorn. "We know who Bjorn is," Jackson said. "There's no link between Bjorn and Kim, no witnesses, nothing on the surveillance tapes." "You talked with him?" "Bjorn had checked out before anyone knew Kim was missing." "McDaniels, I know you don't buy it, but Cahill is our guy. We just need time enough to break him." Chapter 36. Henri, in his Charlie Rollins gear, was having lunch at the Sandbar, the hotel's exquisite beachside restaurant. Yellow market umbrellas glowed overhead, and teenagers ran up the steps from the beach, their tan bodies glistening with water. Henri didn't know who was more beautiful, the boys or the girls. Henri's waitress brought him liquid sugar for his iced tea and a basket of cheesy breadsticks, and his salad would be coming shortly. He nodded pleasantly, and he was enjoying the view and had no place he'd rather be than here. A waiter pulled out a chair at the next table, and a pretty young woman sat down. She wore her black hair in a short, boyish style, was dressed in a white bikini top and yellow shorts. Henri knew who she was behind her Maui Jim shades. When she put down her menu, he said, Julia Winkler. She looked up, said, "Sorry, do I know you?" "I know you," he said, held up his camera to say, "I'm in the business. Are you on a job?" "I was," she said. "The shoot wrapped yesterday. I'm going back to LA tomorrow." "Oh, the Sporting Life job?" She nodded, her face getting sad. "I've been waiting around, hoping. I was rooming with Kim McDaniels." "She'll be back," Henri said kindly. "You think? Why?" "I have a feeling she's taking a holiday. It happens." "If you're so psychic, where is she?" "She's out of my vibrational reach, but I can read you loud and clear." "Sure. So what am I thinking?" "That you're feeling sad and a little lonely, and you wish you were having lunch with someone who would make you smile." Julia laughed, and Henri signaled to the waiter, asked him to set Ms. Winkler up at his table, and the beautiful girl sat down next to him, so that they were both looking out at the view. "Charlie," he said, putting out his hand. "Rollins." "Hi, Charlie Rollins. What am I having for lunch?" "Grilled chicken salad and a Diet Coke, and here's what else. You're thinking you'd like to stay over another day because a neighbor's taking care of your cat, and it's so nice here, so what's the rush to go home?" Julia laughed again. "Bruno, he's a Rottweiler." "I knew that," Henri said, sitting back as the waitress brought his salad and asked Julia for her order, grilled chicken and a Mai Tai. "Even if I were to stay over another night, I never date photographers," she said, eyeing the camera resting on the table facing her. "Have I asked you out?" "You will." Their grins turned into laughter, and then Rollins said, "All right, I'll ask you out, and I'm taking your picture to the guys in Loxahatchee, so the guys in Loxahatchee won't think I made this up." "Okay, but take off your sunglasses, Charlie. I want to see your eyes." "Show me yours, I'll show you mine." Chapter 37. "Whoa!" Julia screamed as the chopper yawed into the coral gold sky. The little island of Lanai grew huge, and then they were dropping softly to the tiny private heliport at the edge of the vast Island Breezes hotels, greener than green golf course. Charlie got out first and helped Julia to the ground as she held the collar of her windbreaker closed, her curly hair parting, her cheeks flushed. They ducked under the rotor blades and ran to a waiting car. "You've got a great expense account, buddy," she said breathlessly. "Our dream date's on me, Julia." "Really? What kind of person would expense a date with you?" "Aww." The driver opened the doors, and then the car rolled slowly over the carriage road to the hotel, Julia gasping as she entered the lobby, all velvety teal and gold and burgundy, dense Chinese carpets and ancient statuary. The sunset streamed through the open-air space, almost stealing the show. Julia and Charlie had their twin massages in a bamboo hut, open to the ocean's rhythmic pounding on the shore. The messieurs quartered the plumeria scent sheets that covered them as their strong hands massaged in cocoa butter before proceeding to the long strokes of the traditional Lomi Lomi massage. Julia, lying on her stomach, smiled lazily at the man she just met, saying, "This is too good. I don't want it to ever stop. It only gets better from here." Dinner came hours later at the restaurant on the main floor. Pillars and soft lighting were the backdrop for their feast of shrimp and kurubuta pork chops with mango chutney and an excellent French wine. And Julia was happy to let Charlie lead her in conversation about herself. She opened up to him, talking about her upbringing on an army base in Beirut, her move to Los Angeles, her lucky break. Charlie ordered a dessert wine and the entire dessert menu: zuccato, pralines and milk, chocolate mousse, lanai bananas caramelized by the waiter at the table. The delicious fragrance of burnt sugar made him hungry all over again. He looked at the girl, and she was a girl now, sweet and vulnerable and available to him. $4,000 had been spent well, even if he stopped right now. But he didn't. They changed into their swimsuits in a cabana by the pool and took a long walk on the beach. Moonlight bathed the sand, turning the ocean into a magical meeting of rushing sand and frothing foam. And then Julia laughed and said, "Last one in the water is an old poop, and that will be you, Charlie." She ran, screamed as the water lapped her thighs, and Charlie snapped off some quick shots before putting his camera back inside his duffel bag and setting it down. "Let's see who's an old poop." He sprinted toward her, dove into the waves, and surfaced with his arms around her. Chapter 38. After a quick dinner out with Keola, I returned to my hotel room, checked for messages. Had no new calls from the woman with the accent or anyone else. I cranked up my computer, and after a while I sent a pretty fine 700-word story to Aaronstein's inbox at the LA Times. Work done for today. I turned on the TV and saw that Kim's story was headlining the 10 o'clock news. There was a banner, breaking news, and then the talking heads announced that Doug Cahill was a presumed suspect in the presumed abduction of Kim McDaniels. Cahill's picture came on the screen, fully uniformed for a Chicago Bears game, smiling at the camera like a movie star, all 6 feet 3 inches and 250 pounds of him. Anyone would have been able to do the math. Cahill could have easily picked up 110-pound Kim McDaniels and carried her under his arm like a football. And then my eyes nearly jumped out of my head. Cahill was shown in a video clip that had been shot 2 hours earlier. While I was having pizza with Eddie Keola, the action had taken place right outside the police station in Kihei. Cahill was flanked by 2 lawyers, one of whom I recognized. Amos Brock was dapper in his pearl-gray suit, a New York criminal defense attorney with a history of representing celebrities and sports stars who'd gone too far over to the dark side. Brock had turned into a star himself, and now he was defending Doug Cahill. Station KITV had cameras trained on Cahill and Brock. Brock stepped to the microphone, said, "My client, Doug Cahill, hasn't been charged with anything. The accusations against him are preposterous. There's not a speck of evidence to support any of the allegations that have been going around, which is why my client hasn't been charged. Doug wants to speak publicly, this one and only time." I grabbed the phone, woke Levon out of what sounded like a deep sleep. "Levon, it's Ben. Turn on the TV, Channel 4. Hurry." I stayed on with Levon as Cahill stood front and center. He was unshaven, wearing a blue cotton button-down shirt under a well-cut sports jacket. Without the pads and the uniform, he looked relatively tame, like a kid in a Wall Street management training program. I came to Maui to see Kim, Doug said, his voice shaking, thick with the tears that were also wetting his cheeks. I saw her for about 10 minutes 3 days ago, and never saw her after that. I didn't hurt her. I love Kim, and I'm staying here until we find her. Cahill handed the mic back to Brock. To repeat, Doug had nothing to do with Kim's disappearance, and I will absolutely, unequivocally bring action against anyone who defames him. That's all we have to say for the moment. Thank you. Levon said to me, "What do you make of that? The lawyer, Doug?" Doug was pretty convincing, I said. Either he loves her, or he's a very good liar. I had another thought, one I didn't share with Levon. Those 700 words I just sent to Ernestine at the Times, they were old news. Chapter 39. I emailed my editor, told him that Doug Cahill was going to be chum for the media feeding frenzy, and why. That a mystery witness had seen him coming on strong with Kim, and that Cahill was being represented by Amos Brock, the current champion bully of defense attorneys. Here's an updated version of my article, I wrote Ernestine. If nothing else, I'm fast. And then I called our sports chief, Sam Paulson. He keeps odd hours, and I knew he'd be up. Paulson likes me, but he doesn't trust anyone. I said, "Look, Sam, I need to know what kind of person Doug Cahill is. My story isn't going to mess with yours." It was a wrestling match that went on for 15 minutes. Sam Paulson protecting his position as the sports world's premier in-guy, while I tried to get something out of Paulson that would tell me if Cahill was dangerous off the playing field. At last, Sam gave me a tantalizing lead. "There's a PR girl. I got her a job working for the Bears." "Hawkins, I'm not kidding. This is off the record. This girl's a friend of mine." "I understand." Cahill got this girl pregnant a couple months back. She's told her mother about the baby. She also told Cahill and me. She's given Cahill a chance to do the right thing, whatever the hell that might be. He was dating Kim when this happened with the other woman? You're certain? Yep. Does he have any history of violence? They all do, sure. Bar fights, one zesty one when he played at Notre Dame. Crap like that. Thanks, Sam. Don't mention it, he said back. I mean, really, don't mention it. I sat on this bombshell for a few minutes, thinking through what this meant. If Kim knew Cahill had cheated on her, that was reason enough for her to dump him. If he wanted her back, if he was desperate, a confrontation could have led to something physical that might have gotten out of hand. I called Levon, and I was startled by his reaction. Doug is a testosterone machine, he told me. Kim said he was strong-willed, and we all know he was a killer on the field. How do we know what he's capable of doing? Barb still believes in him, but as for me, I'm starting to think maybe Jackson is right. Maybe they've got the right guy after all. Chapter 40. Julia felt weightless in Charlie's arms, like an angel. Her long legs locked around his waist, and all he had to do was raise his knees, and she was sitting on his lap. He did just that as they bobbed in the waves. She lifted her face to him, saying, "Charlie, this has been the best. It gets better from here," he said again, his theme song for their date. And she grinned at him, kissed him softly, then deeply. A long, salty kiss followed by another, electricity arcing like heat lightning around them. He undid the string tie at her neck, jerked loose the tie behind her back, and said, "You do a lot for a simple white bikini." What bikini? Never mind, he said, and the swimsuit top drifted away. A ribbon of white on the black waves until it was gone, and she didn't seem to care. Julia was too busy licking his ear, her nipples as hard as diamonds against his chest. She groaned as he shifted her so she was pressed even tighter to him, rubbing like an eager beaver against his dick. She reached around and ran his fingers under the elastic of her bikini bottoms, touched the tender places, making her squeal and squirm like a kid. She pushed down at the waistband of his swim shorts with the backs of her feet. Wait, he said, be good. I plan to be great, she said breathlessly, kissing him, pulling at his shorts again. I'm dying for you. She sighed. He unhooked her legs and pulled off the bottom half of her swimsuit. Carrying a naked girl in his arms, he walked out of the waves as water streamed off their bodies, silver in the moonlight. Charlie said, hang on to me, monkey. He brought her over to where he'd left his duffel bag next to a mound of black lava rocks. He stopped and unzipped the bag, pulled out 2 enormous beach towels. Still balancing the girl in his arms, he spread out one towel and laid Julia softly down, covered her with the second towel. He turned away briefly, set the Panasonic camera on top of the duffel, and switched it on, angling it just so. Then he faced Julia again, shucked his swim trunks, smiled when she said, oh my God, Charlie. He knelt between her legs, tonguing her until she cried out, please, I can't stand it. Charlie, I'm begging you, please. And he entered her. Her screams were washed away by the ocean's roar, just as he imagined they would be. And when they were done, he reached into the duffel bag and took out a knife with a serrated blade, put the knife down on the towel beside them. What's that for? Julia asked. Can't be too careful, Charlie said, shrugging off the question, in case some bad guy is creeping around. He raked back her short hair, kissed her closed eyes, put his arms around the naked girl, and warmed her up with his skin. Go to sleep, Julia, he said. You're safe with me. It gets better from here, she teased. Piggy. She laughed, snuggled against his chest. Charlie pulled the towel up over her eyes. Julia thought he was talking to her when he said into the camera lens, is everybody happy? Totally, completely happy, she said with a sigh. Side note, when it says, it gets better from here, she teased, and then Charlie says, Piggy? What does that mean? I don't get it. Anyway. Chapter 41. Another wrenching 24 hours passed for Levon and Barbara, and I felt helpless to ease their despair. The news shows were running the same old clips when I went to bed that night, and I was somewhere deep in a troubling dream when the phone rang. Eddie Keola spoke to me saying, Ben, don't call the McDanielses on this. Just meet me in front of your hotel in 10 minutes. Keola's Jeep was running when I jogged out into the warm night, then quickly climbed up into the passenger seat. Where are we going? I asked him. A beach called Makina Landing. The cops may have found something or somebody. 10 minutes later, Eddie parked along the curving roadside behind 6 police cruisers, vans from the special response team and the coroner's office. Below us was a semicircle of beach, a cove that was bounded by fingers of lava rock before tapering out into the ocean. A helicopter hovered noisily overhead, beaming its spotlight on the scramble of law enforcement people moving like stick figures along the shoreline. Keola and I made our way down to the beach, and I saw that a fire department rescue vehicle had backed down to the water's edge. There were inflatable boats in the water, and a scuba team was going down. I was sickened at the thought that Kim's body was submerged there, and that she had disappeared to get away from an old boyfriend. Keola interrupted my reverie to introduce me to a Detective Palikapu, a heavy-set young cop in a Maui PD jacket. "Those campers over there," Palikapu said, pointing to a cluster of children and adults on the far side of the lava rock jetty. "They saw something floating during the day?" "A body, you mean," said Keola. "They thought it was a log or garbage at first. Then they saw some shark activity and called it in. Since then, the tides took whatever it is under the bubble rock and left it there, and that's where the divers are now." Keola explained to me that the bubble rock was a shelf of lava with a concave undersurface. He said that sometimes people swam into caves like this one at low tide, didn't pay attention when the tide came in, and drowned. Was that what had happened to Kim? Suddenly it seemed very possible. TV vans were pulling up on the shoulder of the road, photographers and reporters clambering down to the beach, the cops stringing up yellow tape to keep the scene intact. One of the photographers came up to me, introduced himself as Charlie Rollins. He said he was freelance, and if I needed photos for the LA Times, he could provide them. I took his card, then waited in time to see the first divers coming out of the water. One of them had a bundle in his arms. Keola said, "You're with me," and we skirted the crime scene tape. We were standing on the lip of the shore when a boat came in. The bright light from the chopper illuminated the body in the diver's arms. She was small, maybe a teenager or maybe a child. Her body was so bloated that I couldn't tell her age, but she was bound with ropes hand and foot. Lieutenant Jackson stepped forward and used a gloved hand to move the girl's long, dark hair away from her face. I was relieved that the victim wasn't Kim McDaniels and that I didn't have to make a call to Levon and Barbara. But my relief was swamped with an almost overwhelming sorrow. Clearly another girl, someone else's daughter, had been savagely murdered. Chapter 42. A woman's high-pitched scream cut through the chopper's roar. I turned, saw a dark-skinned woman, 5'2" or so, maybe 100 pounds, make a run toward the yellow tape, crying out, "Rosa, Rosa! Madre de Dios, no!" A man running close behind her shouted, "Isabel, don't go there! No, Isabel!" He caught up and pulled the woman into his arms, and she beat at him with her fists, trying to break free. The cords in her neck stretched out as she cried, "No, no, mi bebe, mi bebe." Police surrounded the couple, the woman's frantic cries trailing behind as she was hustled away from the scene. The press, a pack of them, ran toward the parents of the dead child. You could almost see light glinting in their eyes. Pathetic. Under other circumstances, I could have been part of that pack, but right then I was behind Eddie Keola, scrambling up the rocky slope to where media setups dotted the upper ledge. Local TV correspondents fed the breaking news to the cameras as the small twisted body was transferred by stretcher into the coroner's van. Doors slammed and the van sped away. Her name was Rosa Castro, Keela told me as we got into the Jeep. She was 12. Did you see those ligatures? Arms and legs tied back like that? I said, yeah, I saw. I'd seen and written about violence for nearly half my life, but this little girl's murder put such ugly pictures into my mind that I felt physically sick. I swallowed my bile and yanked the car door closed. Keela started up the engine, headed north, saying, see, this is why I didn't want to call the McDanielses, and if it had been Kim... His sentence was interrupted by the ringing of his cell phone. He patted his jacket pocket, put his phone to his ear, said Keela, then, Levon, it's not Kim. Yes, I saw the body. I'm sure it's not your daughter. Eddie mouthed to me, they're watching the news on TV. He told the McDanielses we would stop by their hotel, and minutes later, we pulled up to the main entrance to the Wailea Princess. Barb and Levon were under the breezeway, zephyrs riffling their hair in their new Hawaiian garb. They were holding each other's white-knuckled hands, their faces pale with fatigue. We walked with them into the lobby. Keela explained without going into the unspeakable details. Barbara asked them if there could be a connection between Rosa's death and Kim's disappearance, her way of seeking assurances that no one could give her. But I tried to do it anyway. I said that pattern killers had preferences, and it would be rare for one of them to target both a child and a woman. Rare, but not unheard of, I neglected to add. I wasn't just telling Barbara what she wanted to hear. I was also comforting myself. At that time, I didn't know that Rosa Castro's killer had a wide-ranging and boundless appetite for torture and murder, and it never entered my mind that I'd already met and talked with him. Chapter 43. Horst tasted the Domaine de la Romance Conti, bought at Sotheby's for $24,000 per bottle in 2001. He told Jan to hold out his glass. It was a joke. Jan was hundreds of miles away, but their webcam connection made it almost seem as if they were in the same room. The occasion of this meeting, Henri Benoit had written to Horst saying to expect a download at 9 p.m., and Horst had invited Jan, his friend of many years, to preview the newest video before sending it out to the rest of the Alliance. A ping sounded from Horst's computer, and he walked to his desk, told his friend he was downloading now, and then forwarded the email to Jan in his office in Amsterdam. The images appeared simultaneously on their screens. The background was the moonlit beach. A pretty girl was lying face up on a large towel. She was nude, slim-hipped, small-breasted, and her short hair was finger-combed in a boyish fashion. The black and white images of form and shadow gave the film a moody quality, as though it had been shot in the 1940s. Beautiful composition, said Jan. The man has an eye. When Henri entered the frame, his face was digitally pixelated to a blur, and his voice had been electronically altered. Henri talked to the girl, his voice playful, calling her a monkey and sometimes saying her name. Horst commented to Jan, interesting, yes? The girl isn't the least bit afraid. She doesn't even appear to be drugged. Julia was smiling up at Henri, reaching out her arms, opening her legs to him. He stepped out of his shorts, his cock large and erect, and the girl covered her mouth as she stared up at him, saying, "Oh my God, Charlie." Henri told her she was greedy, but they could hear the teasing and the laughter in his voice. They watched him kneel between her thighs, lift her buttocks, and lower his face until the girl squirmed, grinding her hips, digging her toes into the sand, crying out, Please, I can't stand it anymore, Charlie. Jan said to Horst, I think Henri is making her fall in love. Maybe he is falling in love too? Wouldn't that be something to watch? Oh, you think Henri can feel love? As the two men watched, Henri stroked, teased, plunged himself into the girl's body, telling her how beautiful she was, and to give herself to him until her cries became sobs. She reached her hands around his neck, and Henri took her in his arms and kissed her closed eyes, her cheeks and mouth. Then his hand became large in front of the camera, almost blocking the image of the girl, and reappeared again, holding a hunting knife. He placed the blade beside the girl on the towel. Horst was leaning forward, watching the screen intently, thinking, yes, first the ceremony, now the ultimate sacrifice. When Henri turned his digitally obscured face to the camera and said, is everybody happy? The girl answered, yes, she was completely happy, and then the picture went black. What is this? Jan asked, jerked out of what was almost a trance state. Horst reversed the video, reviewed the last moments, and he realized it was over, at least for them. Jan, he said, our boy is teasing us too, making us wait for the finished product. Smart, very smart. Jan sighed, what a life he is having at our expense. Shall we make a wager, just between you and me? On what? How long before Henri gets caught?